Namaskar, good morning, Swagatam. Very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 8th Global Procurement Summit 2023, Procurement for Infrastructure Development, organized by All India Management Association with the support of Department of Expenditure, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and the World Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, just before we begin, I would request you all to kindly continue to keep your electronic gadgets on silent mode during the session. And with those announcements, I call this session to order. Ladies and gentlemen, just to make it more energetic and more momentous, please put your hands together as we welcome the dignitaries on the dais. We're very honored to have with us the Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, Parliament of India, BJP Lok Sabha Member of Parliament from Hazaribagh, Jharkhand, Shri Jayant Sinha ji. We are also privileged to have with us the Country Director, Asian Development Bank, Mr. Takeo Konishi. Good morning and warm welcome to you. We are also privileged to have with us the Country Director, India World Bank, Mr. Auguste Tano Kouamé. Good morning and warm welcome. We are privileged to have with us the President, All India Management Association, Chairman, Dempo Group of Companies, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo. Good morning. And we also welcome Director General All India Management Association, Ms. Rekha Sethi. Good morning once again. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, extending a very warm welcome to each one of you. In our traditional Indian, it's very customary to begin any auspicious occasion with a lamp lighting ceremony. And I request our dignitaries on the dais to kindly light the ceremonial lamp and mark the beginning of this conference. The diya, when lit, emits energy. It is this energy that is the source of all living being. Each wick being lit is a prayer for global peace and solidarity. Ya Kundenu Tusha Davana Ya Shrupravasramruta Ya Veeravardan Dama Detakara Ya Shwet Padmasana Ya Brahmachuta Shankara Prabhuti. Thank you, dignitaries. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for participating in this auspicious ceremony. We now formally begin the inaugural session. And to do so, may I request the Director General, All India Management Association, Ms. Rekha Sethi, to kindly give the welcome address.
Mr. Jayant Sinha, Member of Parliament and our Chief Guest today, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, President AIMA and Chairman, Dempo Group of Companies, Mr. Auguste Tano Kouamé, Country Director, World Bank, Mr. Takeo Konishi, Country Director, ADB, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today and a very warm welcome to you. It's great to be able to do this program physically and be here with you in person after 2-3 long years. Mr. Sinha, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. There's always so much to learn from you. A distinguished former Minister of State for Finance and Civil Aviation, you are known for your innovative approaches to policy making and economic governance. It was during your tenure at the Finance Ministry that the Government of India set up India's Sovereign Wealth Fund, the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, and the Bankruptcy Code. At the Aviation Ministry, you launched the UDAN scheme for regional air connectivity and privatized several airports. Now, as the chair of the Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance, you oversee the functioning of India's key financial governance institutions, including the Ministry of Finance, Niti Aayog, RBI, and SEBI. You've also been a hedge fund leader, and you worked with Courage Capital, and you've been a global strategy consultant with McKinsey. Mrs. Sinha, you've always been very passionate about environment and sustainability, and we are eager to hear from you on green procurement and also about the Global Climate Alliance. A very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you for coming down from sunny Goa to cold Delhi and for agreeing to introduce the summit to us. You head you head a legacy conglomerate that has a history of involvement across manufacturing, media, education, mining, and services sectors, and you have a seasoned perspective on public procurement. We look forward to hearing from you. Mr. Auguste Tano Kouamé, it is a pleasure to have you with us, and many thanks for agreeing to share your vision and strategy for infrastructure procurement. The World Bank has been a very key partner for AIMA for many years and our efforts and has always helped our efforts in delivering education and training in public procurement. We cherish our relationship and we value the outstanding support that we get from the World Bank. It's wonderful to meet you and welcome you to India and also to AIMA, and I hope to have you with us on many more occasions. Mr. Takeo Konishi, it is a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you so much for joining us. Asian Development Bank plays a key role in funding and mentoring infrastructure development, and you have a great view of best public procurement practices in many different countries. We look forward to hearing more about your experiences and ideas. A very warm welcome to you. The Government of India is a key partner in creating this international platform for public procurement for policymakers and executives, and AIMA deeply values the government's engagement with this summit. We are particularly grateful to the Department of Expenditure, Ministry of Finance for partnering and supporting this platform. Ladies and gentlemen, governments around the world are investing in infrastructure to stimulate the economy following the knocks to supply chains and investor sentiment in the wake of COVID, war, and inflation. Governments are also using infrastructure investment to reorient and transform national economies. There is an increasing localization of supply chains and greater use of digital technologies. However, the outcomes of supercharged infrastructure policies and investments depend a lot on the quality of procurement management. Developing the procurement capabilities is essential for increasing the speed of infrastructure creation and upgrading the quality of infrastructure assets and services. Besides the obvious need for improving the technological and commercial know how, there is a growing need to cater to the environmental, social, and governance priorities. The procurement personnel need to quickly and substantially upgrade their knowledge and skills to ensure reliable access to acceptable supplies. They also need to keep up with the geopolitical and global regulatory trends to avoid potential disruptions in procurement. AIMA's Global Procurement Summit is a great platform to consider contemporary practices, issues, and possibilities of public procurement. We are privileged to have distinguished policymakers, procurement and supply specialists, and experts from India and overseas to help us understand the evolving needs of procurement management, especially in relation to infrastructure development. I'm confident that today we will learn a lot about designing and executing infrastructure procurement, managing risks, applying new technologies, avoiding and resolving contractual disputes, and fulfilling the economic, environmental, and social objectives of public procurement. With these words, I wish you all a great 2 days ahead, and I hope you enjoy the summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful welcome address. I now request President All India Management Association, Chairman Dempo Group of Companies, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, to kindly present the introductory remarks.
Very good morning to all of you. Let me start by warmly welcoming my good friend, Mr. Jayant Sinha, who is Honorable Member of Parliament and actually who is spearheading the mission of climate change under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Auguste Tano Kouamé, Country Director, World Bank, Mr. Takeo Konishi, Country Director, ADB, Rekha Sethi, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me add to the welcome of Rekha and warmly welcome you to this Global Procurement Summit. And thank you for participating in large numbers today. Mr. Sinha, it's a privilege to have you with us this morning. And many thanks for agreeing to join us at the Global Procurement Summit. And you have so much to share, your experience, your thoughts on the role of procurement in infrastructure development, particularly pertaining and getting climate change in, because I think climate change affects every operations that we handle, whether it's supply chain, it's logistics, whether it's purchase, So I thought that Mr. Sinha could add a very different perspective today and start this session on a very positive note. You possess a vast and varied experience as a minister, a member of parliament, global investor, a strategy consultant, and I'm sure all of you will certainly gain by listening to him on his ideas on managing infrastructure creation vis-a-vis managing climate change. Mr. Kouamé and Mr. Konishi, it's a pleasure to have you. And we really at AIMA appreciate the wholehearted support of both the World Bank and ADB for this summit. Not only for this summit, but also the various programs that we do together with you. We are also grateful to the Department of Expenditure, Ministry of Finance, for partnering AIMA on this platform. Ladies and gentlemen, this Global Procurement Summit is an important forum for exploring new approaches to more meaningful creation of public assets and delivery of public services. This conference allows us to look at the emerging trends and issues in public procurement and exchange ideas for making public spending more purposeful and efficient. I think infrastructure development is the key to the nation's growth. We in India have been talking about, or the world has been talking about China plus one. But if India has to really achieve that status, I think a lot more focus on infrastructure development, which the current government is rightly focusing so, has to be put. I was just talking to Mr. Jayant Sinha about my own small state called Goa. And if you look at 5 years back, I think you were there for the foundation stone laying ceremony of the Mopa airport, which has already become a reality. And I think projects like this probably would keep us growing at more than 7% GDP growth rate a year. The choice of this focus of this summit is very, very timely. Infrastructure development, as I just said, has been a key channel for governments to stimulate the economy after the much negative COVID disruption. Infrastructure creation and modernization is also driving the economic restructuring and climate change mitigation agenda, which Mr. Sinha will talk later about. Given the huge outlays on infrastructure projects and their lasting impact on the economy and society, it is critical to design and execute these with great care. According to IMF, many governments squander almost one third of their investment in infrastructure just because of sheer poor management. Infrastructure procurement objectives need to include not just timely and low cost sourcing, but also the long term relevance and viability of the infrastructure that is being created. It's also critical that procurement accommodates environmental and social priorities. Infrastructure procurement can contribute to environment cleanliness and climate change mitigation by favoring green technologies and materials. By insisting on sound ESG credential of suppliers, public procurement can have a beneficial impact on our broader economy. Infrastructure procurement is a great means of economic inclusion by including size, region, and promoter criteria. The large scale infrastructure procurement can foster entrepreneurship and industrialization beyond the established players and locations. One more aspect is digitalization. Digitalization in public procurement has already induced a huge shift towards data centric management in the industry, which in turn has allowed better monitoring of projects and supply chain. However, digital technologies and their applications are evolving continuously, and that requires public procurement personnel like you to constantly upgrade their technological knowledge and skills. During this summit, we hope to get a better understanding of the emerging dynamics of public procurement with special focus on infrastructure development and we are privileged to have practitioners and experts from many parts of the world to help us achieve that objective. Some of the key questions that I believe the summit should address are: how procurement can make infrastructure development more efficient and equitable, how it can foster management and technological innovation, and how procurement itself can be modernized to make a meaningful contribution to new age infrastructure, and what role can the inherently efficient, obsessed private sector play in transforming infrastructure procurement. We will try to cover extensive ground through this 2 day summit and address many of the issues that concern public procurement function. We will discuss how infrastructure project delays can be avoided and how contractual disputes can be resolved more effectively, which is a very common problem as of today. We'll look at the next stage of public private partnership in infrastructure development and procurement and the ways to secure contracts against political, policy, and regulatory shifts over their long cycles. We will talk about the ways to make supply chains more resilient in the era of frequent disruptions and consider the ways to improve governance of infrastructure procurement. We will also hopefully discuss the ways to apply digital technologies in infrastructure procurement. AIMA is grateful to all the distinguished speakers who have agreed to share their vast experience and expertise at the summit. I'm confident that all of us will learn something new and useful in this very important topic. Thank you once again for joining us this morning and wish you very fruitful 2 days of intellectual conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the introductory remark. I take it as my privilege in inviting Mr. Auguste Tano Kouamé, the Country Director, India World Bank, to kindly give the special address.
Good morning. Shri Jayant Sinha, Chairperson of the Standing Committee of Finance in the Parliament of India. Ms. Rekha Sethi, Director General of AIMA. Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, President of AIMA. My good friend Takeo Konishi, Country Director of the Asian Development Bank. Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here today to talk about this very important topic of public procurement in this very important summit. I'm told that this is the 8th time you organize this summit. It shows how important the topic is. And the fact that we're able to gather here today in person after COVID is something to be celebrated, and I hope the future summit will continue to take place in person. Before sharing my opening remarks, I would like to thank the organizers of this summit. Given the importance of the summit, I'd like to thank my colleagues from the World Bank, in particular Mr. Shankar Lal, who has worked very hard with AIMA to make this summit take place. And I would like to thank all the partners also who have worked with the World Bank and AIMA to organize the summit, in particular the Department of Expenditures of the Government of India. Procurement is a means to a goal. And in fact, I should say procurement is a means to several goals. Let me perhaps share with you how we see the size of procurement in the global economy. Based on our research, procurement globally represents $11 trillion per year. This will have been the second or third largest economy in the world if procurement was a country. So it is huge. In India alone, procurement represents about 600 billion per year. And we know that this size is going to grow. India has a national infrastructure pipeline of 1.3 trillion total, which in fact is larger than this. So in the coming years, procurement in India is going to be perhaps even bigger than it has been. Globally also, we know procurement is going to be bigger, especially in the global south, in emerging market economies. We know that about 70% of the infrastructure that should be in place by 2030 has not been built yet in many countries. It is being built as we go along. This gives us the size of the business going forward for procurement professionals. It also shows us the opportunity that procurement has to transform economies, hopefully from traditional economies to greener economies, as Mr. Shri Jayant Sinha's work has shown us that green has to be part of procurement going forward. I said earlier that procurement is a means to several goals, and I would like to share my views on some of these goals, or what some of these goals might be. First, procurement allows government and public officials to provide goods and services to the population. Basic goods and services, not just high-tech or sophisticated goods. Simple things that we use every day are provided through procurement. And procurement can affect the quality of those goods and services and the timeliness of those goods and services. And today we'll talk about, or in this summit, you will be talking about delays in procurement. The second goals that procurement can help achieve is job creation and employment. Several governments have seen procurement as a way to stimulate employment, job creations. In the World Bank, we used to have actually a whole set of activity that has now become a cottage industry, which is procurement through road construction, just to ensure that the activities are labor intensive. So in the process of creating the service or the goods, several jobs are created. A third objective that procurement can help achieve is private sector development, and but in particular SMEs development. Several governments have seen procurement as a way of stimulating their private sector and particularly helping SMEs become viable and learn from larger firms by encouraging firms to work together to have partnership between large and small firms in several procurement contracts. So learning can take place through the activities. A third goal that can be achieved through procurement is greening our economies. We know climate change is upon us. We need to work very hard on adaptation and mitigation. And procurement is part of the conversation, is part of this agenda. And if procurement is not greener, the outcome of activities might not be greener. So procurement is very important in that sense. A fifth goal that procurement can help achieve is inclusion, especially gender. At the World Bank, we pay a lot of attention to how our procurement activities can stimulate inclusion and the participation of gender, of women in the economy, in the procurement in the production of goods and services. I'm losing count of the numbering, but another goal that procurement can help achieve is safety and environmental safety and social safety, social safeguard. You may call them ESG, we call them ESF, environmental and social framework safeguard. It is very important that government show the way on how we can be safe whilst working, and procurement can be used to ensure that when roads are being built through public financing, safeguards are maintained and people are kept safe. So procurement is a very important part of keeping society safe. Another goal for procurement is globalization. We are in a world where global value chains are all integrated. So through procurement, government can send signals that the economy is open for business and contract can be open to competition, and therefore stimulate globalization that way. Similarly, procurement is an important trade policy tool. Government have used it, sometimes not so positively, but most of the time positively, to stimulate trade and encourage the exchange of goods and services, and in fact, transfer of technology and access to technology, access to innovation. Procurement can also be used as an industrial policy tool to encourage particular sectors, particularly infant industries in some countries, but not just infant industries. Procurement can be used to stimulate industries that are emerging. It can be used to encourage competition between firms and enforce competition. And sometimes, unfortunately, it has been used to prevent competition. And finally, let me mention something close to my heart and important for our work here in India. Procurement can be used for regional development. When countries have states that are different levels of development, procurement can be used as a means to level up the playing fields and give opportunities for certain states to emerge and participate in the national economy. I would like to share with you some perspective from the World Bank. At the World Bank, we are only a small player in the procurement landscape in India, but we would like to think that we can make a difference. Our portfolio is only $21 billion, our portfolio under implementation. It is not very large, but it is not insignificant. Through 21 billion, we can move quite a lot. And the good news is that these 21 billions are connected also to government programs. Every year, we approve about 4 billion worth of new projects that will be implemented over a long period of time. And in the implementation process, a lot of procurement happens. We think that in addition to the goals I've mentioned earlier for procurement, our procurement activities, our project can help advance other goals, such as helping stimulate new approaches in some states through e-procurement, for example. We've been working with several states, including Assam, Punjab, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, where we work with the government to help set up public procurement systems, enhancing transparency of procurement processes, and making procurement processes more efficient to increase savings and speed. Our activities go beyond that. In fact, we are also working increasingly with the government of India on the G20 agenda. And as part of the G20 agenda, as you may know, the quality of infrastructure is a very important topic. It has been discussed under previous G20 presidency, and it will continue. The quality of infrastructure is important because if developing countries are going to reach high-income country status in a way that is sustainable, then the quality of infrastructure that is being built now is important so that it doesn't have to be replaced so often and it doesn't have to cause a lot of havoc. So we'll continue that conversation in partnership with the government of India and other G20 members. Let me close by talking a bit about capacity building. We see this as a very important part of our activities. Sometimes at the World Bank, when I talk to colleagues about procurement, we tend to focus on our project, and it's very important. We have to look at our procurement within project very, very carefully. But I also encourage us at the World Bank to go beyond project and support whole economic system, whole societies for procurement activities. And I'm glad that we are partnering with many institutions for this summit, because this is exactly what I think is very important for us to do in order to have greater impact. So we've been working with several institutions in India, the Department of Personnel Training, the newly established Capacity Building Commission, the Administrative Staff College of India, the All India Management Association, of course, the Institute of Supply Management, in developing procurement capacity building trainings both for the public sector and the private sector. And I hope we will continue doing so. And let me close then by wishing you a set of very exciting and intellectual discussions over the next 2 days. And I hope that the outcome of this summit will help all of us achieve greater goals in India and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts with us. I now invite Mr. Takeo Konishi, who's the Country Director, Asian Development Bank, to share his thoughts.
A very good morning to you, Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Jayant Sinha, Excellencies, senior government officials, project directors, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to echo Ms. Sethi, Mr. Dempo, and Mr. Augustine, very warm welcome to you this morning. And it's a great pleasure to see you all physically here today in this Global Procurement Summit 2023, organized by All India Management Association in partnership with Ministry of Finance, the Government of India, World Bank, ADB, and other development partners. Now, India was a founding member of ADB since 1966, and today the country is ADB's fourth largest shareholder. And India has been amongst the fastest growing major economy in the world over the past 2 decades and its various sub-period, despite the contraction in the GDP and social economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. With the sound macroeconomic management, India recovery from the pandemic is now on firm footing. We believe that the GDP growth rebound in FY 2021 was 8.7%, and moving forward, despite a bit of a headwind that we anticipate, the country is expected to grow from between 6% to 7% over the next 2 years. Now, the government has focused on increased public investment and improved effectiveness and efficiency of the capital expenditure. And it is expected that the public investment will soar up private consumption and crowd in public investment. The recent highlight is allocation of the rupee 1 trillion for investment to the states through the 50-year interest-free loans, in addition to the normal borrowing allowed to the states. Now, these are earmarked by the Honorable Prime Minister's Gati Shakti Initiative, or the National Master Plan for Improving Multimodal Connectivity. It is also facilitates urban agglomeration with town planning and building regulation, transit-oriented development, and mass urban transport connectivity to the railways. Now, since the commencing of our country operation in 1986, ADB has been supportive of India's evolving development priorities to support the country's inclusive economic transformation. And ADB is working to build India's industrial competitiveness, creating much-needed jobs, enabling the growth of low-income states, and addressing environmental and climate challenges. And these objectives are complemented by the promoting private sector development, gender empowerment, regional integration, and knowledge service and capacity development. Now, our operation caters to the requirement of India's more advanced state for transformative initiatives while retaining the focus on improving infrastructure, providing economic and social services, and underpinning the capacity building in low-income states. The country program also aims to rebalance the support for hard infrastructure to education and health, finance, public sector management, and this shifts aligned with the India's expansion track towards human development and its response to COVID-19 pandemic. To support ADB's strategy of deepening its engagement with low-income states, investment financing will continue to be complemented by project readiness financing, and particularly with the capacity constraint of the states on the northeastern region. We're currently undertaking the next India country partnership strategy covering the next 5 years, 2023 to 2027. And ADB will continue to support India's priority for robust, climate resilient, and inclusive growth aligned to the new CPS as well as ADB's long-term strategy 2030. And we have a strong pipeline of the project and program for 2023. However, Selection of the project for ADB financing will be made based on their project readiness. This is because we believe that it is very vitally important that the project are completed on time within the cost and proper quality. When projects are completed on time within the cost and the proper quality, the delivery of the best outcome. And we believe that this 2023 Global Procurement Summit, procurement for infrastructure development, value for money is the key to effective and efficient development. The faster the project we implement, the earlier the results are delivered to the intended people, and thereby enabling the people to reap the benefit for more quickly. And that's one of our principles that we are working towards to reduce the time spent so that the project will be completed on time. Now, ADB has undergone several reforms to expedite project implementation. In 2017, ADB adopted a new procurement framework, and the new procurement framework is a paradigm shift, and it embodies two new priorities, principles, shall we say. One is the quality and value for money, and I think the days that, shall we say, moving away from the cost-only based determined factor, we are looking at quality and value for money, where included the two new principles in addition to economy, fairness, efficiency, and transparency. From the procurement procedural-based approach, we are adopting more principle and risk-based approach to procurement, and it considers the capacity of the EAs and adopt a differentiated approach based on the project risk assessment. And for co-finance project, clients can choose one of the developing partner procurement system as long as the principle are the same or the similarity. Further, it promotes open competitive bidding and based on the market condition. It is simpler, flexible, and provides more holistic support for design stage to the project completion. The new framework encourages better suppliers, contractors, and consultants to work on ADB finance project, which will help us deliver the project faster with a better quality within the cost. And all this helps to deliver a better project outcome. And we believe that the good procurement aligning in ourselves also with the best practices will create a win-win situation. It is good for us, it is good for our client and our contractor and consultants. And the learning of this summer can be shared in all projects across the board. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank our team member who are sitting on the second table, led by Mr. Stefan Bistani, and he will be probably giving a presentation on the session 4. And I wish this summit a very fruitful and learning, knowledge sharing experience so that we can all mutually benefit from this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for that those words from you. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly put your hands together as we invite Shri Jayant Sinha ji to give the inaugural address.
This is the click. And will it come up? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Dignitaries on the dais, Shri Shrinivas Dempo ji, President of the All India Management Association, Mr. Auguste Kouamé, Country Director of the World Bank, Mr. Takeo Konishi, Country Director, Asian Development Bank, Srimati Rekha Sethi, Director General, All India Management Association. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, thank you very, very much for the very warm welcome on a cold Delhi morning. And I'm very glad to be with you all to talk about procurement, but really in the context of climate change. As Shri Dempo ji was just saying to you, you have a very important role to play when it comes to climate change and some of the very key challenges that we are facing going forward. In terms of what you have to do, you have to make sure that the supply chain you work with, the suppliers you work with, take into account the very serious and important challenges that we are facing because of climate change. And in that sense, you have to see yourself. You have to see yourself not just as procurement professionals, but you have to see yourselves as crusaders for climate action. Not just as procurement professionals, but crusaders for climate action. Because the decisions you make, the choices you make, the manner in which you work with your suppliers are going to define how we take on the climate crisis and how we deal with this very important set of issues that we are dealing with. So, to give you more of a background, to provide you an understanding of the really serious planetary crisis that we are facing right now, I'm going to go through a few slides. And if we have some time, Rekha ji, maybe we can take a few questions from the audience as well. But I want you to understand that the climate crisis that we are facing right now is really, really going to define our future. And I'm very glad that on the dais today we have two members from multilateral development banks, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, because they are going to have to play a critical role, a vital role in establishing a climate alliance that can accelerate climate action. The financing solutions, the technical assistance, the leadership that they provide is going to make a very important and major difference to how we tackle climate change. So I want to talk to you today a little bit about that, really highlight the role you all have to play as procurement professionals, highlight the role that the multilateral development banks have to play, and all of us in leadership positions, all of us who are in leadership positions, whether in politics, whether in management, whether in procurement, whether in financial services, for us, this has to be one of our topmost priorities. I'll emphasize that again. This has to be one of our topmost priorities. Now, we know that it's very, very important to ensure that we can restrict global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade. But to do that, ladies and gentlemen, we will need a global climate alliance that can mobilize trillions of dollars for the global south. And I'll explain to you why we need trillions of dollars. But these trillions of dollars in the global south are going to have to come from the global north, because the global north has the capital, the global north has the technology. Without the capital and the technology, the global south, that is developing countries, are not going to be able to accelerate climate action. And for that, we will need to create a robust climate financing system. We will need all of you to be able to look and find those solutions that will enable us to decarbonize, spend a little bit more, find a way of dealing with that so that we can really accelerate climate action. And India in particular, and this is some of the work that we're doing right now. I just finished the T20 Inception Conference last week. As part of our G20 work, we are working very hard to take an idea that came out of Germany and the G7, which is a climate club idea, and expand it into a climate alliance idea and really see whether we can advance it through the G20. So these are the points I want to highlight. And I want to tell you that the work that we've been doing on the climate alliance is work that has built on research institutes around the world. So we've been very fortunate. We've had MIT, we've had the Tufts Climate Policy Lab, London School of Economics, the Research Institute for Economics in Berlin, ORF in India, Shakti in India, lots and lots of experts, lots of very senior people that have been working on this set of ideas. So this has been a research effort that's lasted 2 years and that has built on a lot of background research done by these very eminent groups. Now, I want you to recognize, first of all, that the planetary crisis that we are facing is quite beyond our ability to deal with it right now. So, as of now, post COP27, the sense is that we are going to warm somewhere between 2.5 to 2.9 degrees centigrade. That's where our current policies will take us. what everybody has said is that we have to restrict warming, and this was the Paris Agreement, that we have to restrict warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade. That's what everybody says we need to do to prevent catastrophic climate change. But as of now, in Egypt, the UN Environment Program emphasized that we are on track for 2.8 degrees centigrade. Instead of 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade of global warming, which is where we need to be, we are on track for 2.8 degrees centigrade. Now, these are not academic abstract numbers. These are numbers that are going to make a difference in your life and the life of your children. Really severe and very catastrophic impact. So at 2.8 degrees centigrade, we are facing a serious planetary crisis. And what's even more important to recognize, and the red part is the emissions from the global south. By and large, the global north, which is the OECD countries, and these are the 30 most developed countries in the world, by and large, the global north has undertaken legal commitments to get to net zero by 2050. So the EU, the European Union, that is, they are committed to getting to net zero by 2050. The UK has passed a law, New Zealand has passed a law, Australia has passed a law, Japan has passed a law, and even the US has said quite strongly that they will be also moving towards net zero by 2050. China has announced that it will peak its emissions before 2030 and it will reach net zero by 2060. So the bulk of carbon emissions going forward, the emissions that are going to cause 2.8 degrees centigrade warming, the bulk of these are going to come from the global south. So the action has to be in the global south. The action has to be in your supplier base if we want to get to net zero. So we really face a situation where it's the global south that has to undertake most of the hard work. Now, what is the impact of a world where we are on a 2.8 degrees centigrade warming trajectory? We just have to look to Pakistan to understand what that means. So in Pakistan, we've had epic floods in 2022, absolutely epic floods. These weren't covered very much in India, but globally, this was a real red flag to the world about what climate change can do to a country. So to understand what happened to Pakistan, recognize that there were two extreme weather events that happened in Pakistan. Two extreme weather events. How many of you remember the heat waves of April and May in India? Do you all remember that it got to almost 50 degrees in April and May of this year? You remember that? What happened at that time was we said it's all right. We just have to crank up our air conditioner. How does it matter? We are used to 50-degree temperatures in Delhi in June, so we'll just crank up the air conditioner in April and May. Doesn't make a difference. It actually did make a difference. What happened was that in April and May, because of the unprecedented temperatures we had in South Asia, we had tremendous glacial melting. The glaciers of the Himalayas melted much faster than anyone had expected. So the Indus River was full to the brim with glacial melting. And then in Sindh and Baluchistan, which was a second extreme weather event, they had rainfall that was 5 times the normal. So on the one hand, we had heat waves in April and May, which resulted in incredible glacial melting. And then we had 5 times the amount of rain you normally have in Sindh and Baluchistan. The net result of it was a third of inhabited Pakistan saw epic flooding. And that epic flooding has caused Pakistan direct impact $33 billion. Direct impact $33 billion. Indirect impact probably $50 to $60 billion. Now, to understand how much $50 to $60 billion is for Pakistan, please recognize that Pakistan's GDP is $350 billion. $350 billion, which means that $60 billion, effectively somewhere between 15 to 20% of their GDP in 2022 was affected by this kind of flooding. Now imagine if that were to happen to India. Our GDP is $3 trillion. If we have losses of $500, $600 billion, can you imagine the kind of catastrophic impact that would have to our economy and to our people? But that's exactly what Pakistan has just gone through. So climate change is not something abstract and something we say, oh, let's worry about it 20 years from now. It's here and now. It's going to affect your life tomorrow. Those of you who live in Gurgaon have had to deal with storm bursts and have been stuck in traffic for hours because we've not seen this kind of rainfall before, know that it is already affecting your life today. We've had epic flooding in Kerala, for example. We've had heat waves and droughts all across India. So climate change is here now. And to recognize how much this is going to impact us, remember that what you're seeing in Pakistan, what we've seen in India and South Asia is one of the most vulnerable countries for climate change. We are dealing with all of this at a temperature rise of 1.2 degrees centigrade. 1.2 degrees centigrade. And when we get to 2.8 degrees centigrade, we could trigger some of these major climate tipping points where, for example, if the ice sheets of the poles start to melt, the coral reefs die, the Atlantic current collapses, permafrost melting in the tundra. These are major tipping points. And if we trigger one or two of these major climatic tipping points and then they interact with each other, even the 2.8 degrees centigrade temperature may be exceeded. We could have 3 or 4 degrees centigrade changes. So again, let me once again repeat. The weather impact that you're seeing right now is because of 1.2 degree global warming. 1.2 degree global warming. And that, by the way, has happened over 200 years. Over 200 years, we've had 1.2 degree global warming. The prediction is, the UN prediction is, we will have 2.8 by 2100, which means over the next 80 years, the world will warm by an additional 1.6 degrees centigrade. Do you understand what I'm saying? The rate of global warming is going to go up dramatically. And at 1.2 degrees centigrade, we are seeing this kind of impact. What's going to happen at 2.8 degrees centigrade? These are very, very dire and very unpredictable challenges that we are dealing with. And as I said, if because of this global warming, we trigger some of these major climate tipping points, we are going to be in a zone that we can't even predict what's going to happen. So climate change is here and now. It's very dangerous, it's highly unpredictable, and we have to take action immediately. And as I said, you have to switch from being just procurement professionals to becoming climate crusaders, because the choices you make are going to determine how fast we move forward. But the good news is, and this is my big headline for today, if there's one thing you need to remember as you leave today, please remember the following. Not 2.8 degrees centigrade, which you should also remember. The one thing you should remember is net zero is net positive. Net zero is net positive. People think that if we decarbonize, that if we switch from coal and we switch to renewables, that it's going to hurt our development. No, it's going to help our development. I have been working for the last 4 years, as I said, with many eminent research institutions around the world. We've done extensive modeling studies, and you know me as a politician, but I started my professional life as an energy modeler. I have a degree from IIT Delhi, and then I went and got a degree in energy management and policy from the University of Pennsylvania. And I worked for 4 years as an operations research specialist doing energy modeling. So this is something I know a little bit about technically and professionally. And well, thank you. And because of my long-standing interest in energy modeling and climate modeling, I went and I worked with all these climate modeling groups to understand what it would mean for India if we went on a net zero pathway. And I can tell you the models did not exist. When I started asking the questions, what would happen to India if we were to get on a net zero pathway? What would that do for GDP? What would that do for jobs? What would that do for air pollution? What would that do for energy security? Those questions had not been answered because the climate scientists didn't think in that fashion. So we had to literally build the models 3 or 4 years ago, working with MIT, working with Stanford, working with Tufts Climate Policy Lab, etc., to study the impact of net zero. And the good news we found is that net zero is actually net positive. And if we put in those massive investments, if you change the way you're doing procurement and we move towards decarbonization technologies, green technologies, we will find that India's GDP, our number of jobs, our air pollution, and our energy security, all of these are going to dramatically improve. Dramatically improve. Today, India is losing 1 to 2 million lives a year because of air pollution, most of which is triggered by fossil fuels. Those of you who've seen the air in Delhi know how bad the air is. We're losing 1 million to 2 million lives a year from air pollution. Anybody born and brought up in Delhi is going to lose 10 years of their life because of air pollution. So, whether we look at it in terms of GDP growth, whether we look at it in terms of jobs, whether we look at it in terms of air pollution or energy security, we are far better off if we can go to a green economy. So net zero is net positive, and the question is, how do we achieve that? The other aspect about net zero that is very important is that we need to start working on it now. All the modeling is telling us that if we were to get behind the curve on this, literally, that if we wait for another 10 or 20 years, it will become very difficult for us to get to net zero by 2070. That is in our lifetimes. So this is the decisive decade. This is the decade when your purchasing decisions, how you think about climate action, are going to either enable us to bend the curve and bring us to net zero, as the Honorable Prime Minister has said, by 2070, or keep us on the baseline trajectory that we are on right now. And on the baseline trajectory, we will be one of the largest emitters, if not the largest emitter on the planet, because currently our baseline shows us increasing carbon emissions as opposed to reducing carbon emissions. So we have to make decisions now to be able to address climate action. And if we do that, net zero is net positive. It will require very significant investments, but those investments, if we put them in now, they will be able to bend the curve. Now, this is where we will need support, because the modeling is also telling us that we have to massively increase investment in decarbonization technologies. And to understand how big this difference is, please recognize that total private sector capex that all of you do in our management and operations of all of our major companies, Shrinivas ji and others do, total private sector capex in India is about $65 billion as based on government data. So we are investing $65 billion a year in private sector capex. The modeling is telling us that if we need to get on a net zero trajectory, we have to increase private sector capex by $50 to $100 billion a year of decarbonization technologies. That means green technologies. Only then we will be on a net zero pathway. So the amount of investment that's required is very, very dramatic, and we have to double the private sector capex. But unfortunately, and this is where I will look to our colleagues from the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, if you actually take their own data and say, how much are you providing the global south to undertake these massive investments, India needs $50 to $100 billion a year. There's been modeling by the Brookings Institution and others which say that the global south collectively needs $2 trillion a year. India needs $50 to $100 billion a year, but when you add Nigeria and Indonesia and Brazil and South Africa and all the countries of the global south, collectively they need $2 trillion a year. India needs $50 to $100 billion. Global south needs $2 trillion a year. Against the $2 trillion a year, this is what we are getting from the multilateral development banks. And as far as the private sector capex is concerned, which is where the bulk of the investment has to be, there's very, very limited money that's coming from the World Bank, from the Asian Development Bank, from the IFC, from the European Investment Bank, and all of these other multilateral development banks. The capital is in the global north. The challenge is in the global south, as I just said, whether it is the impact of climate change or whether it is the investments that are required. So we need a lot of support from the global north to be able to pull this off, and we are not getting that done. So what we are proposing as part of the G20, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but essentially we are suggesting that we create two groups, the global north, which is group B, and they commit to getting to net zero by 2050, but they also commit to making massive financing and technology flows available to the global south, because that's the only way the global south is going to be able to deal with both the mitigation, that is the decarbonization aspect of it, as well as the adaptation and resilience associated with dealing with climate change. So unless the massive financing and technology flows happen from the north to the south, it's very difficult to see how we can actually get to accelerated climate action. And everything we do builds on what was already decided in the Paris Agreement. This is what we are proposing our research group as part of the ideas for the G20. And the way to get started, and again, this is where some of you will have a bigger role to play than others. We have to get started. This is work McKinsey's done, that we look at it sector by sector. Some sectors like power, cement, steel, fertilizer, these are the sectors that emit more carbon emissions, higher greenhouse gases. So what we have to do when we build the Global Climate Alliance is we have to build sector by sector working groups to figure out, for instance, in steel, how do we get green hydrogen based blast furnaces? Today, blast furnaces are being built by our steel companies. Anyone from the steel industry here? Any hands? Anybody from the steel industry? No? So in the steel industry right now, they are building blast furnaces which will last 50 years. 50 years. If they build these blast furnaces to use coal, we will be emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere for 50 years. So that's why I said we've got to act now. That those blast furnaces have to be built with green hydrogen instead as a fuel. And if we do that, then we are eliminating carbon emissions for 50 years. But we have to do that right now. Similarly with cement. Similarly with coal-fired power plants. These are long-lived assets. Sector by sector, we've got to work with the global north to find ways in which we can reduce carbon emissions. And so we are suggesting that, we come up with membership for the Global Climate Alliance. The incentives are really around show me the money. And if we are able to get that kind of financing support from the global north, then countries like India and Nigeria and Brazil can make firm decarbonization commitments. Otherwise, it's not possible for us. There's no point for India to say we'll be net zero by 2070 if we can't finance our way there. So we have to find sufficient financial support to make that commitment. If we can make that commitment, then we can sign up for binding decarbonization targets. And there are different ways of paying for it, right? There are ways in which the global north countries, depending on how much carbon they're emitting, should pay to the global south ways of doing it. And of course, there are even more details around how ODA and MDB financing can be used to create sufficient climate funding. But it really is about climate financing. If we can't get the financial support, it'll be very difficult for us to be able to put this money to work. We were just, as we were getting on the dais, were discussing how electric vehicles today on a total cost of ownership are cheaper than petrol vehicles. They're cheaper. But the upfront cost is much higher. So let me just give you some numbers so you understand why this is a financing problem. Let's take auto rickshaws. So the cost of an auto rickshaw, operating cost of an auto rickshaw is 5 rupees per kilometer. So if you're in a petrol auto rickshaw, the operating cost is 5 rupees per kilometer. The operating cost of an electric rickshaw is 50 paisa per kilometer. It's 1/10 the cost. But the capital cost of buying an electric auto rickshaw is a little bit high. It's about 20% higher than buying a petrol auto rickshaw. So because the upfront cost is higher, people tend to prefer buying a petrol auto rickshaw, whereas actually the operating cost on a day-to-day basis is far, far lower for an electric auto rickshaw. And that's true for electric, light commercial vehicles as well, and so on. But if we can't find ways of financing that upfront cost so that you can get the total cost of ownership benefit of electric vehicles, you will not be able to get people to buy electric vehicles. So we need to find financing solutions so we can capture the total cost of ownership while finding a way to be able to lease the vehicle or finance the vehicle at a lower cost over time. So these become major financing problems. And right now, the cost of capital, if you are looking at making an investment in any decarbonization technology today, if you're looking to invest in buying an electric vehicle, for instance, your cost of capital in rupees could easily be 12-13%. But if I was getting the same vehicle in Europe or in the US, I would be paying right now, of course, the funds rate has gone up, but on average, you'd be paying 6 or 7%. So I'd be paying 12 or 13% in India, but I'd be paying 6 or 7% in Europe or the US as a cost to capital. There's a 6-7% gap because the cost of capital, the financing system in the global south is not as good. So we need a transformed climate financing system so that when you, for example, work with your suppliers so that you can actually get them to make the investment in something that is decarbonizing over time, you can also provide them the financing support. So we need to get you as procurement professionals the right financing solutions as well, through defining what is green, what is not green, by getting the MDBs and the DFIs involved, by getting agencies like NIF, Rekha ji, you were mentioning, the National Investment in Infrastructure Fund, that can be a local green agency. All of these people have to work together to lower your cost to capital so you can go to your supplier and say, please invest in decarbonization, please invest in green technologies. Total cost of ownership is going to be lower, but here's the financing solution that will go along with the purchasing commitment that we want from you. So you might have to also think of these innovative financing solutions so that you can enable them to decarbonize. And for that, we will need strong green investment agencies. That is already happening with NIF, that's already happening with NABFID, which Sri Kamathji is heading. It's a debt financing agency that has been set up by the government of India to be able to do these kinds of infrastructure build outs, to be able to do green technologies, and to be able to provide attractive rates for green financing as well. So I'll stop here with just telling you that the kinds of instruments that we're talking about and the scale of what we're talking about has never been attempted before. It's almost like a green Marshall Plan or a Green New Deal at the same time. But what we're talking about with the multilateral development banks and the DFIs right now as part of the G20 process is not just a just energy transition program, which Indonesia and South Africa announced, which have $25 to $50 billion a year. We're talking about loss and damage of 10 and 20 billion a year to help countries like Pakistan. We're talking about a research fund like a climate innovation fund, then currency hedging facilities, credit guarantee programs, climate fund of funds. Only if we engage in all these types of financing, blended capital instruments, are we going to be able to reduce the cost of capital for green investments, enable you all to become climate crusaders, not just procurement professionals, enable you all to provide the guidance to your supplier base to be able to buy green technologies, to buy decarbonization technologies, and be able to provide them the financing solutions so that they can rapidly decarbonize and we can save the planet from 2.83 degrees centigrade, which I will again repeat for you, has to be one of our topmost priorities. But we need the global north to work with us in this kind of a global climate alliance to provide these kinds of blended finance solutions so that you can do your job as climate crusade as well. Thank you very much. I hope I have done my job well of convincing you. Thank you.
Absolutely, very enriching, very encouraging words from the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, Parliament of India, Shri Jayant Sinha ji. Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful inaugural address. Now we take this moment to release the summit souvenir, and may I request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly do the honors. Presenting the souvenir of the summit. Can we all put our hands together and bring in more energy? Ladies and gentlemen, releasing the souvenir of the summit. We quickly take this moment to capture this on our cameras. Thank you so much, dignitaries. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We now have reached to the concluding point of the inaugural session, and may I request the Director, AIMA, Dr. Raj Agarwal, to kindly present the vote of thanks. Inviting Dr. Raj Agarwal to propose the vote of thanks.
On behalf of AIMA, it is my privilege to propose vote of thanks. At the outset, we are thankful to Shri Jayant Sinha ji, Member of Parliament, for his inspiring and inaugural address on global climate change, and which is very important in a present context. And when we talk about this green procurement infrastructure development. So thank you, sir, for your address. We are also thankful to Mr. Augustine Tano Kouamé, Country Director, World Bank, for his motivating and learned address and continued support in our endeavor in organizing this procurement initiative. I also thank Mr. Takeo Konishi, Deputy Country Director, Asia Development Bank, for his excellent address and continued support to AIMA in procurement initiative. I also express my gratitude and thank to Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, President All India Management Association, for his address and welcoming all dignitaries and delegates of this summit. We also express our thanks to Ms. Rekha Sethi, Director General AIMA, for her dynamic leadership and providing all necessary support in organizing the global summit. We are also thankful to the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and World Bank for partnering with us in organizing these events and also for their support in hosting the event. We also like to thank our gold partner, Larsen and Toubro, silver partners, Asian Development Bank, Deloitte as knowledge partner, Power Grid, along with the GAIL, Authority of India Limited, as PSU partner, and Government e-Marketplace, as well as NBC Limited as associate partner to support us in the event. All the speakers and dignitaries from India and abroad also deserve our appreciation and thanks for their support and cooperation in organizing this massive global event. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
We quickly take this moment to present mementos to our dignitaries. May I request Mr. Shrinivas Dempo to kindly present a memento to Shri Jayant Sinha ji. Thank you so much. Presenting memento to Shri Jayant Sinha ji, I request Mr. Shrinivas Dempo to kindly present memento. We also like to present a memento to Mr. Auguste Tano Kouamé. Thank you so much, sir. We also like to present a memento to Mr. Takeo Konishi, and I request Mr. Shrinivas Dempo to kindly present a memento to Mr. Takeo Konishi.